The first reading today is from Exodus 12, 1 through 14. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell the whole congregation of Israel that on the 10th of this month they shall take a lamb for each family, a lamb for each household. If a household is too small for a whole lamb, each shall join its closest neighbor in obtaining one. The lamb shall be divided in proportion to the number of people who eat it. The lamb shall be without blemish, a year-old male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it until the 14th day of this month. Then the whole assembled congregation of Israel shall slaughter it at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorsteps and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the lamb that same night. They shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted over the fire with its head, legs, and inner organs. You shall let none of it remain until the morning. Anything that remains until the morning you shall burn. This is how you shall eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And ye shall eat it hurriedly. It is the Passover of the Lord. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both human beings and animals. On all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be sign for you on the houses where you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague shall destroy you when I strike that land of Egypt. This day shall be a day of remembrance for you. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord. Throughout your generations, you shall observe it as a perpetual ordinance." Today's psalm is Psalm 116, 1 through 2, 12 through 19. I love the Lord, who has heard my voice and listened to my supplication. For the Lord has given ear to me wherever I call. How shall I repay the Lord for all the good things God has done for me? I will come and call for the name of the Lord. I will fulfill my vows to the Lord in the presence of all God's people. Precious in your sight, O Lord, is the death of your servants. O Lord, truly I am your servant. I am your servant, the child of your handmaid. You have freed me from my bonds. I will offer you the sacrifice of thanksgiving and call upon the name of the Lord. I will fulfill my vows to the Lord in the presence of all of God's people. In the courts of the Lord's house, in the midst of you, O Jerusalem. The second lesson of today is 1 Corinthians 11, 23 through 26. For I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you, that the Lord Jesus on the night when he was betrayed took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, he took the cup also, after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he returns."
gospel this evening is John chapter 13, verses 1 through 17 and 31b through 35. Glory to you, O Lord. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that he had tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you should also do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. You may be seated. Good evening. Stephen Schwartz is a composer of music. If you don't know musicals, you might know his work from the DreamWorks movie, Prince of Egypt. He and Hans Zimmer composed the music for that movie. But if you do know musicals, you might know Stephen Schwartz from Godspell or Wicked, probably his most popular work. But there's another musical he did that I think is really good and perhaps a little important for us to consider tonight. It's called Children of Eden. And as the name suggests, it's about the first 8 chapters of Genesis. The first act is about Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and the second act is about Noah and the flood. And as you might expect, they had to take some creative liberties to come up with an entire musical out of a text that you can read in all of 18 minutes. And while there are some points where we might disagree with some of the theological implications in it, it's not really about religion, despite the subject matter. It's really about family. And I'm going to spoil the plot of Children of Eden for you now. Sorry if you were really anxious to go see it live. I really just want to focus on the second act. As I said, there's some creative liberties taken. It veers off of the Bible account a little bit, but it does so in some really good ways. So, in the second act, it starts with Noah preparing his family to board the ark, but there's a problem. Noah has his wife, and his older 2 sons have their wives, but his youngest son isn't married yet. They don't know who he's going to marry. And he is going to reveal the love of his life and tell his family who she is at dinner one night. And they're all excited to get on board the ark with this new girl and be safe while God wipes out the race of Cain from the world. They're the bad guys. But there's a problem when he reveals the love of his life. As you can probably predict right now, it is a woman of the race of Cain. She's a very nice girl, but she's on the wrong team. She's one of the bad guys. Noah says, I'm sorry, son, you can't have her on board, but as you would expect with a young man, love triumphs over whatever his dad said, so he sneaks her on the ark. And this makes God very angry. The whole project of the flood was supposed to wipe out the race of Cain, and now the race of Cain is preserved on Noah's ark. So what's God to do? In this musical, God stops talking to Noah. He decides to wipe out everyone and really truly start over. So the family is sitting there on the ark, unsure of what's going to happen, with this maddening rain just drenching them day by day. Every day they can't get away from it. They always hear the rain falling. It's driving them a little crazy, and Noah can't hear God anymore. And to make matters worse, one day, Noah's other sons find the stowaway. It results in a fight that almost results in one of the boys getting tossed overboard. Noah barely manages to break up the fight and tells everyone to stop, and he's going to try to figure it out. And he desperately prays to God and hears nothing in response. And his wife tells him, you have to be the father now. You've got to make a decision. So Noah calls his family together as the rain continues to fall on them, the endless gray skies, the darkness. It's nothing but leaking and raining and darkness. And they gather together in this little room on the ark. And he says, I don't know what God wants anymore. But as long as we don't know where to go from here, let's do it together. Let's reconcile. And so they do. And they sing this lovely song. And the final words of this song are, if there's silence in the sky, in a world without a future, we will swear to be together in whatever time we have. The disciples didn't know that those words would soon be describing their future. Silence in the sky, a world without a future. Yeah, that's where they were headed. Soon they would see Jesus dead on a cross. And they would see God the Father doing nothing about it. Their wisdom from on high, their Lord, their Messiah, is dead, and God didn't send angels to help. God didn't cause some uprising to save him. Nothing. God just let it happen. Jesus just died. Their hope for the future, their certainty that they would be rescued from foreign oppression, gone. No future. And silent skies as God seems to watch on passively while an innocent man suffers and dies. Jesus tried to prepare them for this. He washed their feet, he proclaimed forgiveness to them, and he gave them a new commandment. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. The kind of love that goes so far that we'll lay down our lives for one another. The kind of love that overcomes not only petty differences and small-minded complaints, but even big problems that stand in the way of grace and forgiveness and repentance and humility. The kind of love that overcomes the evil that would divide us. Jesus says this is what your new community will be. It will be defined by this selfless, life-giving love. And this love will hold you together. And it would be tested, because what they would see in the coming day and into the near future would be the world falling apart. God comes to shake the world. The forces of evil conspire against God, and there's this great battle between good and evil as all of the hatred and jealousy and violence of the world fights against God. And the world shakes, and the future is uncertain. And wading into that uncertainty, this community is preserved by love that overcomes differences, overcomes feuds, overcomes even real, genuine pain and disagreements. A love that can bind them together through the worst of it, when their troubles are just so much bigger than they are, and far too big to handle. If I were to ask you to point to Bangladesh on a map, I suspect that most of us probably could not do it with any confidence. Bangladesh is a very small country, not a very powerful country, not a very big player. It's just east of India, south of the Himalayas. And Bangladesh has been going through some hard times in recent years. Seasonal flooding is pretty common in Bangladesh, but because of a changing climate, the floods are getting more erratic and more dangerous. There are record-setting flash floods that wipe away entire villages overnight. And Bangladesh doesn't have the same sort of money to spend on infrastructure that we could imagine America having. They have to find another way to deal with this. And they found an interesting way. I think last week, NPR's Consider This podcast did a session about Bangladesh and what they're doing to deal with these flooding problems, this problem of a changing climate. And they talked to a few people, and it's almost heartwarming to see how they're handling this. They talked to this engineer who's in southern Bangladesh, and what he did is he would check the weather up north, where they're getting their water from. And when he saw that there's a lot of rainfall up north, he would contact one of his colleagues who's a little further north than him. And this colleague is not some, scientist with a bunch of degrees. This colleague is a housewife who is entrusted to go out and take readings of the river. And she sees how much the river changes day to day and sends this information back to him. So one day he saw that there was a lot of rain coming, and he sent some messages up to her, and she checked the river, and she got back to him, and together they crunched the numbers and found out that there was a big flood coming. So he sent out a message to every cell phone in the entire country. But here's the problem: not everyone in Bangladesh has a cell phone. And even the people who have cell phones, some of them are those like old Nokia brick phones that you drive an SUV over and still be able to make calls on. They're not exactly the most high-tech phones. But there's this one village where they talked to this lady and she didn't have a cell phone. But her friend's nephew had a cell phone, and he got the message, and he told his aunt, and his aunt told the other people, and together they told everyone in the village, so that the village was able to make it to a safe place. They had to go a couple of days without food, but everyone survived. A dangerous, deadly flash flood that was survived because an engineer checking weather forecasts talked to a housewife who took measurements of the river, and they got a message out to some kid on his cell phone who told his niece, who told someone else, who told someone else, until everyone knew and could make it to higher ground. It isn't a wonder of technology or infrastructure that is saving lives in Bangladesh. It's people who care about other people enough to make time in their lives to do the little bit that it takes to save lives, to get the warning out. It's housewives and engineers and kids with cell phones saving lives. Climate change, flash flooding, these are problems that are far too big for any one person to fix. Far too big for anyone in Bangladesh to overcome. But what they can do as change comes rapidly and the world seems to fall apart and they have to figure out how to adapt to life in a new world where things are getting tougher to live on the river. What they can do is they can take care of each other. If they don't know what the future is, they can love each other. If they're not getting any miracles from on high, they can love each other. And that is enough to save lives. We have problems that go far over our heads. We know the problems that we face in the world. The violence, the cruelty, the hatred, natural disasters. We've seen them. And we can't stop it by ourselves. But God has given us this gift, the selfless love, that even if we can't fix the problems, even as God and the powers of evil fight over the soul of the world, we can look after each other and take care of each other until it all shakes out and we come out on the other side. And maybe as we're loving each other, as we're reconciling those differences, as we're looking past those petty complaints that we might have, the little disagreements, as we're getting over these things and binding ourselves together in this community of love, maybe, even though God is busy fighting the powers of evil, maybe we'll hear God's voice in unexpected ways in these acts of love. In that scene from Children of Eden that I was talking about at the beginning of this sermon, it ends really remarkably. See, the family just starts reconciling, and then they're celebrating their reconciliation, but their celebration is cut short because they hear a sound that surprises them, and then another thing that surprises them is something they don't hear. So the sound they hear is the cooing of a dove, and I suspect most of us know what that means if we know the flood story. But the sound that they don't hear is the pitter-patter of the rain on the roof of the ark. For the first time in as long as any of them can remember, just after they've reconciled, the rain stopped. Thanks be to God.